Story time. So back in the summer of 2019, it was brought to my attention that there were these 2 wind farm control workshops in Europe, one in Amsterdam and one in Pamplona, Spain. And these were 6 days apart from each other, so I figured, you know what, I should probably go to both of them. My immediate thought was, how can I turn this into a bike packing trip? You know, as always. So I looked up the distance between the two. It was 900 miles in 6 days, 150 miles per day. So I've done rides like that in the past, including the previous fall, riding across France and Belgium, not doing 150 miles per day average. I think it was average about 100 miles a day. I figured this would be a difficult trip, but possible. And then after the second workshop, I could probably take some vacation time and see some more famous cycling places. And on the previous trip, I was able to go ride up Mont Ventoux, which is famous for being a really hard mountain to ride up.
Lance Armstrong is about to make the final turn for the finish. What an ascent of Mont Ventoux.
I took a look at the map, and afterwards, if I were to maybe go to Barcelona, from Pamplona, I could go up to the Pyrenees and do the Col de Tourmalet, which is another famous climb, kind of something to check off on the cycling bucket list. So I kind of committed. I was like, yes, registered for the workshops. I'm like, I'm gonna do this. The first step was to create some routes. On the last bike packing trip in Europe, I was using Google Maps in real time, which worked, but sent me down a lot of dead ends, down dirt paths, and these grass borders of farms. Did not look like roads at all. I was pretty pissed. So I was like, I'm not gonna use Google Maps this time. I'm gonna try to get everything sorted out, put it on my Garmin. The first step towards getting routes together was to pick cities as waypoints. As part of that process, I stumbled upon the fact that like the Koppenberg was in between Ghent and Paris. So I was like, all right, I should be able to work that in. Next step was to build the routes. And I just discovered this app called Komoot. I think I saw it on like GCN or something like that. So I was like, all right, I'll try out this Komoot app. I finished all the routes and booked all the hotels the morning before I was flying out. Boxed up the bike, made a little mount for my GoPro. So I had a layover at Gatwick Airport in London, where I was switching to a different airline. So I had to go and actually pick up the bike box and recheck it on the next flight. So I get to the baggage claim. It's taking a long time to come out, and I'm kind of getting worried. I go to the counter for Norwegian Airlines, and I'm like waiting for my baggage here, and I'm like, oh yeah, they probably didn't put it on the plane, like nonchalantly. I'm like, that happens this normally? And she's like, yeah, just fill out this form. It'll be on the next flight tomorrow. So I was like, this sucks. But as long as it shows up, that's fine, because I got a couple days in Amsterdam. So this isn't destroying my plan. So I took a bus, which was nice. It was convenient, clean, fast, all that stuff. I'm in Amsterdam. I'm seeing people ride their bikes everywhere. There's just, biking is the way to get around. Over in Boston, it's like, if you're on a bike, it's kind of like you're doing something adventurous in a way sometimes. And a lot of people are riding around fully kitted out, even just to commute. Whereas in Amsterdam, it's just plain clothes, even if it's raining. They're just like, whatever. Some people ride with an umbrella. It's just totally built into the culture, and it's awesome. I've been checking this website that they gave me for checking on baggage like religiously. I'm trying to call, nothing. I'm getting no information whatsoever. So I'm in the middle of the workshop. I get a call from this number that I don't recognize. So I'm out in the hall, they're like, oh, we got your bike and we can deliver it tomorrow. And I was gonna leave tomorrow. And they're like, well, we can't deliver it tonight, but you could come pick it up tonight. So I leave the workshop early, jump on a tram, and then take like a commuter rail kind of train, which was like high frequency, super convenient, fast. Here I was thinking, oh yeah, Amsterdam is like really awesome for biking, but their public transit is amazing as well. So good job, Dutch. So I get to the airport, it's there, it's actually mine. I finally have it in my possession. Put my bike together in the airport, ride it back like about 10 miles to get to the city, all on like separated protected bike paths, by the way. So impressions of Amsterdam, beautiful place. I love the architecture. I love the density. I love the canals. I love the walkability. One thing that was really strange to me after I started biking through the city is how you barely stop. There's really a flow to the city. It's not like this rules-based system where it's like, it's my turn now, so you're gonna stop, or it's your turn, so I'm gonna stop. It's just everyone goes and does these micro adjustments to their speed so they don't hit each other. It's really cool, but it took a lot of getting used to on my part. Day one on the bike. First destination was Ghent. I really like that city. I only got a chance to pass through it on my last bikepacking trip in Europe, so I tried to leave Amsterdam really early, right from the get-go. My new navigation solution was giving me trouble. Within the first mile or two, I was already frustrated. So against my better instincts, I threw Google Maps on simultaneously. So I was hoping that I could use Google Maps to get out of the city and get onto the commute routes as soon as things got a little bit less dense and I was turning a bit less. This ended up being a bit of a stupid idea as well, because it ended up taking me in circles a couple times. This was not a good start to the trip. So I turned off the Garmin navigation. This decision was a fateful one, as we'll learn later. It really determined my quality of life for the next 6 days. It was a bit of a fork in the road. An hour or two in, it started to rain, which is a bit of a problem for my phone. So I had to put this bag over the top of the phone to keep it from getting too wet. There was also a pretty bad headwind I started to notice. So I'm riding along. Pretty nice that you can travel basically this entire distance from Amsterdam to Ghent on separated bikeways, but I was getting hammered by the wind and the rain. Every time I pass by a wind farm, I notice that the turbines are pointing in the same direction as me, and they're spinning pretty quickly, which means it's going to be hard to ride. At one point, enough water got into the speaker of my phone that I couldn't really hear what it was saying, because Google Maps kind of navigates by giving you some voice directions and giving you some visual cues on the map. I couldn't see the map because I had the bag over the phone, so I was relying on the audio directions, and those started getting very quiet because of the rain getting into the speaker. For the first day, things were not going very well, but I can't complain too much. It was dead flat. It was on really nice bike infrastructure. At one point, there was a cow blocking the bike path, and I'm like, oh man, I hope cows like bikes. I was just completely soaked, and I was just thinking to myself, man, this sucks. And every time I would want to complain in my head, I would just see some older woman riding around with groceries or a kid on her bike like it was nothing. So I was like, you know what? Don't be such a fucking baby, Pete. It's also kind of funny that people always make these arguments in the US about, oh, we can't have bike lanes because the weather isn't perfect every single day. But you see people in the Netherlands and Belgium, they're not riding in perfect weather every day. They're just getting it done. At one point in Antwerp, I was having trouble finding where Google Maps was telling me to go, so I'm riding around, I'm looking at it, and it looks like it's telling me to take this, to somehow get over this river. I don't know if it was a ferry or what, so I'm looking around near the docks for a boat, and eventually I realize, oh, I have to ride inland a bit, look around, and find this elevator with a line of people trying to get onto it on their bikes, and lo and behold, there's a tunnel under this river, and it is cool as hell, and everyone's riding their bike along, and even there were some little kids riding in front of me. It was kind of interesting how, as you move from the Netherlands into Belgium and go further south in Belgium, you sort of have this gradient of cycling culture. In Amsterdam, it's extremely normal. Everyone's riding in plain clothes, and as you start going further and further south into Belgium, you start seeing more and more high-vis, more mountain bikes, more performance stuff, more helmets. So after 153 miles of riding, I think I got to the hotel in Ghent at about 9 o'clock at night. The place I'm staying at was really cool. It was a music hotel, So there were pianos everywhere, and I get in, and someone's just like playing a piano in this hallway. They had a sign on the wall that was basically like, oh, if you want, play some piano. Have at it, Haas. Just walked out and like got some junk food in Ghent, like burgers and fries and some beers. So I was just like, so tired. I got a takeout, brought it back, ate it in bed, and went to sleep as early as I could because I knew the next day was going to be another hard one. Day 2, Ghent to Paris. I didn't get as much sleep as I should have, but I was up early and out the door in the dark in Ghent on my way to Paris along this canal. It's really awesome how far you can travel in Belgium and France along these canals that have a paved path next to them. This day was supposed to be like 180 to 200 miles or something like that, and it was about 30 to the Koppenberg. So if you don't know what the Koppenberg is, it's famous in cycling races as this cobbled hill.
In de volksmond de Koppenberg.
That gets very, very steep.
Werkelijke maximale percentage, 22%.
So I was still using Google Maps to get there, and it sent me up the wrong side, so I ended up at the top and had to descend it first. And it's kind of crazy that they marked off the Strava segment on the pavement itself so you can see where it starts and ends. I was like, all right, I'm gonna ride up the Koppenberg as fast as I can. Obviously, I would have got the KOM if I didn't have all that stuff on my bike and I hadn't ridden so far the day before. That's not true at all. Almost straight from the get-go, I'm in 40, 42. So I'm in the absolute lowest gear that I have, and I am just barely crawling up this thing. If you try to get up out of the saddle, the rear wheel starts slipping because the cobbles are all wet. But I got to the top. It hurt.
Holy shit.
And then I was like, what now? Because I gotta go to Paris, and it's 172 miles away. And I just killed myself getting up this cobbled hill for fun.
Holy shit.
The wind has not stopped at this point, keep that in mind. So I was like, oh, what should I do? It's 9:30 a.m. I have 172 miles to go. If I try to ride this in this wind, I am not going to get there until like 11 p.m. and I'm not going to be able to even see Paris in the daytime. So I made the decision to cheat. So I found a train in Viella, which is about another 30 miles away. So I got to the Gare du Nord in Paris, ended up riding around the Arc de Triomphe at rush hour. It's like 10 lanes wide of traffic. Crazy, but probably less dangerous than riding in the US. I then took a ride down the Champs-Elysees because that was another kind of bike bucket list thing. That's the end of the Tour de France. So I had to tick that box off and get a good photo for the gram, you know? The gram. The gram is everything. In Paris, I got to walk around in the daylight. I got to go get some food. I had to go get some chain lube because at this point my chain was completely disgusting from riding in the rain that entire day, and hopped into bed to get ready for another hard day the next day. So day 3, I had to go from Paris to Tours. I left early in the morning. I rode out through some trails through the woods towards Versailles. And on my way there, I stopped and took a look back at the Eiffel Tower, and that looked pretty cool. Versailles was nice. I got to be a little bit of a tourist there.
In 800 feet, turn left.
Of course, the wind had not let up. It was still cranking away right in my face, destroying my life. That's a little dramatic, but it was hard. So I'm between Paris and Tours in the middle of this French farmland, and there's just no shelter at all. So I'm getting battered by the wind, and any effort you put in only gets you 2/3 the speed that you normally would. So it's going to take that much longer to get there. As expected, Google Maps told me to go down some roads that weren't really roads. But this time I wised up and I was like, I am not riding on these. I will allow it to reroute me. At one point, Google Maps even was telling me to ride essentially along a creek, not across a creek, along a creek, through a tunnel, and it looked like on the other side, it just like went into a pond or something. So like, oh, this is good. I think I got the tour around 8 p.m. Really beautiful city, so much cool architecture, some really old looking stuff, some newer looking stuff. That was a 143-mile day, and it took 11 hours. Should have taken like 9. So yeah, the wind really was throwing a wrench in the gears. At this point, like every tendon and ligament or whatever below my waist was just like wanting to die, or at least get some sleep. So I got some food and I went to sleep. Day 4, I had to go from Tours to Royan, which I think was another 170 miles or so. But yes, I pulled the ripcord again and decided to take a train for part of the way, cutting off 100 miles of the day. You know, the wind was just so bad. The ironic thing is that I went over there to learn how to make machines better at stealing energy from the wind, but really the wind was stealing energy from me. So I hopped on the train in Tours, went about 100 miles. As soon as I got off the train, it started raining. And the wind this day was the fastest that it had ever been. I think it went from 15 miles per hour to about 22 miles per hour.
So I don't know if you can hear this wind, but this is ridiculous. I'm only able to go like 9 miles per hour. I can't even hear myself think or talk. It's raining. I'm out in the middle of nowhere in some French farmland again. Let's see if I can get a look here. Look behind me. Look to the side of me. There's nothing there. And I'm just sitting in the wind. My right knee kind of hurts. Actually, kind of hurts a lot. Could be something wrong. But I'm taking it easy, just barely kind of limping along. Trying to get to this goddamn beach in one piece. Alright, it's starting to rain really hard now. Fucking A.
It was bad. I was complaining to myself a lot. I was screaming into the wind, saying lots of very bad words.
Fucking A.
But I got to the beach. It was sunny when I got there in Royan.
Alright, so quick, I'm gonna go over the daily routine after we get to the hotel. Done with the ride, get to the place. So get in, throw everything on the table over here. Bike. Usually hotels have some place to store the bike. Sometimes I'll bring it in the room. Usually in the US I'll bring it in the room because the rooms are big enough. And you know, there's elevators and all that. So first thing, plug in chargers. This battery pack is basically my sole source of energy during the day, and I leave my phone plugged into it most of the time, so that's important. Get that charged up right away. It's like below half right now. Jump in the shower next, and in the shower wear the kit to basically wash the cycling kit. Usually just use like body wash or whatever the heck they have. You know, it actually works. I mean, it doesn't smell the next day. And then if they have one of those heated drying racks, you can put them on there and they'll be dry by the next day for sure. Air works somewhat well. This bathroom has this little heater thing, so if I close the door and leave the heater on, it'll probably actually help. You know, this stuff is quick drying fabric anyhow, so it should be dry by tomorrow, and if not, it's not a big deal because, I mean, it just gets wet anyway, with sweat usually, or, in the case of today, rain. So yeah, that's it. That's the routine. And then eat.
I ate an entire pizza. The guy behind the counter, when I ordered the largest pizza they have, he's like, "Is this just for you and you're eating it here?" I was like, "Yeah, dude, I'm an American, okay?" So I got to sleep and tried to get ready for the next day because I knew the next day was gonna be a big one. All right, so day 5. Considering that this was going to be the longest day since I took a train the day on the way to Paris, which was going to be the other longest day. I would like to have left early, but I had to wait for the first ferry out of Viella. Got to have a coffee and a chocolate croissant on the way over. Oh man, I really miss the coffee over there. You just get good coffee everywhere. So the ride started out really nice. The wind was pretty much gone, it wasn't raining. I even got on the wheel of a pair of serious looking cyclists for a while and was able to maintain like 20-mile-per-hour pace with them. This helped make up some serious time. At one point early in the day, Google Maps told me to turn onto this trail that was like deep sand, like foot deep sand. You probably couldn't even walk in this very easily, and I was like, no, not gonna do that. So I just kept staying on the bike path and let Google Maps reroute me accordingly. But this was a bit of a preview for what was going to happen later on in the day. After I got off the nice bike path, I ended up getting onto this kind of cool trail that had a concrete paved section in the center. It was about like 1 foot to 1.5 feet wide. And I was riding on that through these like pine forests. But eventually, the concrete started looking less and less maintained. And eventually there were these really big gaps in it where I would have to get off the bike and walk because there was really deep sand in between. Eventually it just got so bad that I had to start doing some hike-a-bike.
God damn. This is fucking bullshit.
About 3 miles into the crazy hike-a-bike, halfway jumping up on these crappy concrete sections, I see these strange patterns in the pine needles. I didn't think much of these patterns until I look up and I see about 50 yards away a little tiny wild boar in the middle of the trail. And I'm thinking to myself, great, this is a baby and there's going to be a mom wild boar. I'm out in the middle of nowhere. I can't ride fast because the trail is all messed up. I'm going to get attacked by this thing. I'm going to get injured. My bike's going to be broken. And I'm not going to be able to contact anyone because I have no cell service out here in the middle of nowhere. So at that point, I went fast as possible, hike a bike. Eventually, I get to this sign that effectively says, this trail is not suitable for bikes. And I was like, good to know. Halfway in. Being halfway through, I didn't really have any other choice but to keep going.
fuck?
It ended up being about 7 miles in total. So I got through it. I got back to a paved path. I think I was probably at about 30 miles in at this point, which was like, oh shit, I have 140 left to go. Soon thereafter, my wonderful friend Google Maps sent me down some really sandy trails through the middle of what looked like a tree farm because the trees were planted in these perfect rows. And the sand was so loose that you couldn't even really walk the bike in it, never mind ride it.
Oh!
So at this point I was pissed. I'm walking on this for a few miles, like intermittently running, because I'm like, man, I can't afford to lose time today. This is a long day. I should be riding right now. Every minute I spend walking, I am just falling behind, and that means my day is getting longer and longer. My right knee had been bugging me for a couple days at this point, and around mile 60 of this day, it started getting pretty bad, and I was starting to get a little bit worried. There was really not much I could do. I was not going to bail out, so I adjusted my saddle, put it up a little bit, took some ibuprofen, and tried to pedal with good form. Towards the end of the day, I think probably about at mile 140 or so, I ended up going into this like state forest or something. It was like a pine forest, really sandy, near the coast. It reminded me a lot of Cape Cod actually. And looking at kind of the sun setting coming through the trees was just like really surreal. At that point I was like, okay, you know, this is nice. I'm having a good day. But I still had quite a ways to go, and at this point it was getting late. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna be riding in the dark a bit tonight. You know, I lost so much time earlier. I got to the hotel at about 9:30 p.m. The day ended up being 12 hours of moving time, so the longest day of this entire trip. Absolutely killed me. And then I went out to try to find some food, and the city was not big enough to have anything open that late at night. I think there was like a bar open, but they weren't serving food anymore. So that night, after my hardest day, I basically just had to eat a protein bar or something, or like a granola bar for dinner and go to sleep. All right, so day 6, getting to Pamplona. The last day on the first leg of this trip. Only had to go 79 miles. The previous day had really soured my relationship with Google Maps, so I decided to give the Garmin OpenStreetMaps Komoot approach another shot. And it was a good thing that I did, because it was actually pretty nice. I mean, other than getting used to sometimes Garmin telling me to turn left when it actually means right, you know, I just had to get used to looking at the path on the screen and not the individual arrow commands. The first 30 miles out of Capbreton were nice and flat, and then they started taking up a little bit as I was entering the Pyrenees. I knew that I was going to have 2 small climbs for the day. I first stopped, got a coffee, and got some actual real mountain spring water. They just have, you know, coming out of a pipe. So the climbs weren't actually that bad. They were, you know, about 6%, which was nice. It was kind of a good intro. The landscapes were really beautiful. You know, saw lots of livestock. They were just like having a good time. They seem to have great lives over there, the livestock. At one point I see this like hill in the distance. It looks like it's got all these like rocks on the side of it, but they're actually sheep. And if you stop, you could like hear them in the distance. In Pamplona, I took 3 days off for this workshop. I was trying to get my knee to feel better, resting, and wasn't really changing much, so it was kind of worrying me as I was walking around. I was like, I got the call to Tourmalet coming up after this on the second leg of this trip, so am I gonna survive? Is this Pyrenees gonna make it through the Pyrenees? On the 7th day of riding, I packed up and parted ways with Pamplona, a place permanently preoccupied with pork products, and pedaled to Po to proceed with the protrusion into the Pyrenees. Wow, that was hard to say. There were a couple cyclists riding around when I first left Pamplona. Rode kind of together with them for a bit. Started riding up into the mountains again, and had another cow blocking the road incident, which I'm getting used to by now. The escapees are everywhere. Luggage. Alright, so for day 8, had a 57-mile route planned going from Pau to the top of the Col de Tourmalet. So this was the big one. This was the big climb. I expected it to be the hardest. I knew what to expect from doing the Ventoux last year. I knew I was going to be sitting there basically dying for 2 hours or so. So I left Pau in the late morning and I headed toward Lourdes to stop and grab some lunch. And I was thinking about maybe like praying to the Christian God or something and hoping that it would heal my knee, but I decided, you know, if that God really did exist, probably just do it anyway. And if there was another God, he or she might get offended that I was praying to the wrong one, and then they would make my knee worse. So no praying, just eating in realistic preparation. It was about 40 miles to the base of the Tourmalet. A few miles up, I took the split for the Voie Laurent-Fignon, which is a good idea because cars aren't allowed on that stretch of road anymore. But I did encounter, once again, a livestock roadblock. And none of them charged me and rammed me off the cliff, which was really nice. So the Tourmalet is the highest mountain pass in the French Pyrenees. It's a long climb, and it's just constant pain, constant difficulty, and slow motion. But I really like that.
Already fucking totally fucked.
It's actually really cool to be able to move slowly,
14.5 kilometers to go.
putting out tons of effort,
Woo! Fucking dead, dude.
but it's so quiet.
So far to go.
It's kind of like meditation,
Man, I don't know how the fuck I'm gonna do it.
and I highly recommend it.
That's too insane.
So I'm climbing. As I start getting closer to the top, I'm like in the clouds, or it's really foggy or something. And you see these ski lifts that just look like they should be carrying ghosts or something up to the top. They're not moving. And you can't see like very far in either direction. You just see this cable with a chair hanging off of it. And it was really creepy. There's something cool about doing a climb that was in like the Tour de France or whatever, because it's sort of like you get to go play baseball in Fenway Park or something like that, but your legs are being beaten with a baseball bat the entire time. It's actually pretty awesome.
That's too insane.
So at the top, I took a photo and then started a little 1 mile descent to go try to find my Airbnb. The place where the Airbnb was kind of looked like a ski resort ghost town. Obviously there wasn't any snow, so people couldn't go skiing at this time of year. So there's really not much to do up there except ride your bike up. So I get to the address and I'm looking on Google Maps. I'm like, where the heck do I go in to this place? Google Maps says the building is permanently closed. So I'm like, okay, well, is it possible that I got scammed on Airbnb? So I'm walking around trying to find an entrance, trying to find the lockbox that he's describing in his email, which was all in French. So I finally figure out I need to walk up this sort of dimly lit flight of stairs. And I'm walking up and the walls are covered with graffiti. I'm like, all right, this looks like an abandoned building. So I keep walking. I get to the top, find some mailboxes, and I find the lockbox to get the keys, use the keys, open up this sliding door that goes into this other area, which is completely dark, flip on some light switches, kind of look down this hallway, and it just looks like someone's about to get murdered at any moment. Open up the door to the Airbnb, have to find the circuit breaker panel, turn on the master breaker for the entire apartment, turn on the master valve for the water, hopefully hot water, and I'm about to take a shower, so I look around for some towels. And I'm looking through the cabinets, there's plenty of blankets and everything, but no towels. Luckily there was a hairdryer there. So I spend 15 minutes drying myself off with this hairdryer, throw on my clothes, and go out and try to find some food because I was starving at this point and just praying that there would be something open at the top of this mountain. Luckily there was a restaurant open. I get in there and I'm completely alone. Obviously there's no one else in there except for the owner or manager or something. And they had this meal that was like a chicken leg, French fries, a salad, and 2 hot dogs. And that was just like sent down from the gods. So I eat, I go back to the weird, creepy apartment, and I'm like, okay, time to go to sleep. Unfortunately, at this point, I was starting to get a sore throat. So like I was coming down with this little cold. I was like, man, I really should be sleeping a lot tonight to try to kick this thing. But I was having trouble sleeping because I thought like at any moment that this Airbnb was some sort of trick or something. Someone's gonna walk in the door and murder me. So day 9, I had a 55-mile route plan going from the top of the Tourmalet to Bosost in Spain. First thing in the morning, I left my spooky ski resort ghost town, descending these 10 miles, and it's going from the 30s Fahrenheit, rising up into the 50s Fahrenheit. I was really happy I was able to find a little tiny place in the middle of nowhere to grab a coffee because I knew I had 3 big climbs to do that day. Before I knew it, I was climbing up the Col d'Espagne. It was a little cloudy, but the roads were really nice. They were clear. I only saw one other cyclist and hardly any cars at all. Basically did the Col d'Espagne at threshold, which is not that high for me, but I was still happy with it because, you know, I just did the Tourmalet the previous day. I was feeling pretty good, except for my tendons. Both my Achilles tendons just kind of felt like they were, I don't know, every time they would flex, they were just like scrunching up like a bungee cord or something, and it didn't feel good. The top of the views were just awesome, so worth it. The descent down the other side of the Col d'Espagne was really beautiful as well. Like, I had to keep myself from getting distracted and trying to stay focused on the road. The next climb was the Col de Parachute. I think the Col de Parachute was my favorite climb of the entire time, maybe even my favorite like moment of the entire time, because riding up that, it was just green everywhere. The sun was out, it was beautiful. It didn't get super steep in any parts, but it was steep enough to where it was really a climb, and it was a serious effort. At the top I met up with this guy from Spain who was riding up a bunch of cols going the other direction. So we exchanged some photos for the gram, said hi, whatever, like, see you later, good luck, bikes are awesome. I think that's one of the few cyclists that I actually talked to for a decent amount of time for the entire trip. On that next descent, I ended up having to stop for a shepherd bringing his flock across the road. Contrary to the maps, the last climb of the day, which was the Col de Portelon, was the steepest, I believe. It had the steepest sections anyway. That was another really nice climb. Not quite as nice as the Parachute. Day 10 on the bike, I had a 67-mile route planned going from Bossos to Tremp in Spain. As I was looking at the route at first, it looked like it had this section that was like 5 kilometers at 18% and then a 48% descent. So I was thinking, how could that possibly be right? I mean, 48%, that's like riding off a cliff. And 18% for 5 kilometers is like deadly. Luckily, that wasn't the case. It was actually a tunnel, the Viella tunnel. So I was a little worried at first that it wasn't going to be possible to ride a bike through this tunnel. And at first I'm riding up on the sidewalk because I'm like, this is a little nerve-wracking having cars see me in this tunnel, and I don't even know if I'm supposed to be here. Eventually this truck pulls up behind me with yellow lights flashing, and I'm like, oh shit, I'm in trouble or something. The guy's honking at me, and I look back, and he's pointing, like, get in the lane, get in the lane. I'm like, okay. I stop, hop off the sidewalk, and start riding in the right lane. So this guy gets behind me, and he's just basically my escort. So I have this motor escort through this tunnel for about 4 kilometers. It's slightly uphill. There's like this breeze blowing in my face the entire time. Like, I don't know if it's ventilation through the tunnel or if it's just wind coming through. And the crazy thing was that like every time a car would pass, you could feel the contraction of the cross-sectional area of the tunnel, like speeding up the flow towards you. Anyway, I was hammering down because I didn't want this guy behind me to be waiting for too long. Had to stop and kind of take it in and just think like, what the heck did I just do? That tunnel was so surreal. As I was riding throughout the day, the mountains were getting a little bit smaller and a little bit drier, and I had a couple more little tunnels to go through as well, which were pretty cool. I got to Tremp, and it was another really small city with everything within walking distance, tons of cafes, tons of grocery stores. Got some food, went to the hotel, and got some rest. On a side note, that just highlights something that I really like about these places that I was going, the small cities in Europe, how you go from like a dense city with low-rise buildings. You travel a few miles and you're basically out in the wilderness again. You don't have to travel through miles and miles and miles of single-family homes and suburbs and stuff like you do in the US. The ironic thing is that in the US, people sort of think like, oh, I'll move out to the suburbs so I can be closer to nature, like I'll have my yard and everything. But when everyone does that, you just move nature a lot further away. So people, when they want to go hiking in the US, they have to take a car and travel like 20, 30, 40, 50 miles. Whereas in some of these small cities in Europe, you can just take a bike 2 miles out and you're back in the mountains in the middle of nowhere. And it's really a lot better. Day 11 on the bike was the last final push into Barcelona. So it was 116 miles from Tremp to Barcelona. Right after leaving Tremp, I was heading up the last big climb of the trip. And it wasn't that big, but it was really nice. Like looking out over the valley, it sort of looked like you were in an airplane or something. We started getting more like reds and tans and yellows in the color palette. It was starting to get really dry, and saw a few cool Spanish castles. They look like really utilitarian, like they're just made for basically war or something. Best part of the day was riding up along this ridge where they'd installed a bunch of wind turbines, packed them pretty densely. Getting into Barcelona was kind of a pain in the ass. Like the last 10 miles were just filled with so many traffic lights. It took me so long to go those final 10 miles, and it started raining a little bit. And I was just like, man, I had been looking at beautiful scenery for the past couple of days.
Tell you what, I'm really getting tired of these unending beautiful landscapes. I wish I was just back home looking at a 200-foot deep Applebee's parking lot.
On a positive note, my legs were feeling pretty good at that point, and my cold was pretty much gone, so I couldn't really complain too much. I got into Barcelona kind of late at night and went out, grabbed some food really close to the hotel. Didn't really see much of Barcelona, and just went to bed. For the last 2 riding days of the trip, I didn't want to stay in Barcelona for the rest of the time until I left, so I was like, yeah, I should go see Girona. So day 12 on the bike, I rode 63 miles up to Girona, since that's kind of like a cycling mecca. Girona was really beautiful, like really narrow streets. I guess they filmed part of Game of Thrones there.
Shame.
And then finally the last day on the bike, I was riding from Girona back down to Barcelona. Originally my route that I built on Komoot was basically going back the same way I went the previous day, but that wasn't really that great of a route in terms of scenery, so I decided to make a new one, just go straight out to the coast and ride along the coast the entire time. My first contact with the coast was this like beach resort looking place, which was really nice, and I kind of thought about trying to take a swim, but I was a little too lazy, so I just kept going. I didn't really feel like stopping, getting sand in my shoes and all that. About 35 miles into the day, this sort of serious looking road cyclist guy caught up with me, and we ended up working together for a while, and then a few miles later, this other really serious looking guy got on the back. So this third guy hops on the back and then makes his way to the front. And this guy was friggin' hammered down. He was a serious dude. He like had electronic shifting, aero wheels, a bike tattoo on his calf, shaved legs, all, the 9 yards. This guy was a serious cyclist, and he was fast too. So I'm holding on for dear life, just trying to stay behind this guy. Unfortunately, we only went a few miles, but if we had gone all the way to Barcelona, I would have been there in no time. So I get back to Barcelona, check into this hipster-looking hotel or whatever, and my first thing is, I should go find a cardboard box so I'm not worried about this the entire time. Like, am I going to be able to pack my bike up and go home? So I found one right away, actually, only a couple blocks away. That was a relief, despite being kind of expensive, 22 euros for a cardboard box. So yeah, the last couple days in Barcelona, I was just kind of like hanging out, doing nothing, which is pretty boring for me. Not having a mission every day, like trying to be on the bike and get from place to place is kind of, I don't know, what do you do? On the last night, I boxed up the bike, and then the next morning I walked down and I'm about to leave and try to get to the airport early in the morning, and as I'm walking out, I see on the wallpaper in the hotel lobby this interesting phrase, "Upon an ordinary bicycle," yada 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 yada, whatever. That was kind of serendipitous. In conclusion, bike packing or bike touring, whatever, I think is the best way to see a place. It's fast enough so you can get a lot of quantity, you can see a lot of stuff, but it's also slow enough so you can see enough detail. Whereas like if you're in a car, you see too much stuff with no detail, and if you're walking, you don't see enough. It's kind of slow. In terms of things that I learned, I would say get used to using your chosen navigation solution, whether it be paper maps or maps on a GPS device or maps on a cell phone, whatever. Get used to it ahead of time so you're not wasting time having to learn how to use it. Another thing I learned was that you should check the wind forecast, because the wind can easily add 25% onto a day. But ultimately, it's those things you don't prepare for, the things that go wrong, the goals you set that are maybe a little bit out of reach, that put you into this hopeless state of mind when you're halfway through the day. And when you get through that and you actually make it, it's just the most rewarding and addicting thing. And once you get home, all you want to do is go back out and do it again. Thanks for watching, and I hope everyone can get back out again very soon.